Alafia, and welcome once again to the online IFA classroom. My name is David Graham, and again I go by Awo Ifa Foray at the IFA Foundation International. Um, Today I'd like to answer a question from one of the subscribers. The question was, could I give a little bit of insight or background as to how I came to IFA or the IFA philosophy? A better way to word it would be how IFA came to me. And I, gave it some thought and thought it was a worthwhile question to answer. So I'll give you a little bit of background on that. I get asked that a lot, especially being an English-speaking Caucasian male from North America. Uh, how did you get into this, and what's your story? So a little bit of background on myself. I was born to military parents, so we moved around quite a bit. I was actually born in Europe, and by the age of 2 or 3, we had come to the U.S. And we hopped around every 4 years or so up in the Northeast. And by about my middle school year of life, 7th or 8th grade, we relocated to Orlando, Florida. I was raised in the church, mostly Protestant, Presbyterian, Baptist. Went to vacation Bible school, went to church every Sunday, went to after church care, etc., etc. So I know my Bible pretty well. Um, but by the time I was about 13 or 14, two things happened. One, I really began to ask what I thought were the big picture questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? What happens when we're gone? And two, I met a man who is still a very good friend of mine today, who introduced me to what I'm going to call, blanket statement, the occult. Introduced me to European witchcraft, introduced me to, I guess, what some folks would deem Wicca, and all manner of outside of the box spiritual thinking. In that time, 14, 15, 16, he took me to our local Botanica, again in the Orlando area. And I became really enamored and enthralled with the idea that there were ways that were so outside of the box, besides Christianity, Buddhism, etc. And something inside really resonated. All the stuff that I had been told my whole life was taboo or was evil was something that I could explore, something I could read about and learn about. And the other cool thing was it was, this world of seemingly world of fantasy or fairies and elves and etc. etc. And it was really cool for a young person who just wanted to explore, learn, get their hands on stuff. So I began inhaling books left, right, and sideways. Again, books on European witchcraft, on the occult, on Wicca, etc. And then at this Botanica, I was introduced to Santeria Lukumi. And this would be about, again, 14, 15, 16 years of age. Introduced so much that I began to volunteer at the Botanica, and I would work, stock shelves, inventory, help with little projects, and rather than getting paid, they would gift me herbs or oils or books, or, as I began to know folks there, I began to get gifted ceremonies. So I received elegua or eshu. I received my necklaces. And I really, again, enjoyed this alternate worldview or this alternate way of thinking that had always been hands off, had always been taboo. And I didn't exactly know, what I was doing. I certainly didn't know fundamental principles. All I knew was when you did certain things right, it worked. Didn't know why, didn't know how. But what frustrated me quite a bit was being an academic young man. I would again read, study, learn, do my part, and I would ask questions, and I would get answers like, "You're not ready to know that. You haven't been doing this long enough. You're impertinent for asking." And on and on and on. So I dabbled in the occult, in witchcraft, and in Santeria Lukumi. certainly enough to know more than most folks my age, for 5 or 6 years. By my mid 20s, early to mid 20s, I had learned a lot. I had come a long way. But I decided it was time to get off my backside and really earn a living and really become self sufficient. So I can say that I put the tools, I put the philosophy, I put my intense study to the back burner, and spent the better part of the next 5, 8 years doing nothing but working. Um, Whether it's a coincidence or not, or it's just that I'm a child of Oya, but I had no problem finding gainful employment. I had a lot of doors of opportunity opened for me, and I worked pretty much 24/7, 365 for many, many years. By my late 20s or early 30s, I had become what our society would define as, quote, successful. And I had that which I was seeking, which was financial independence and the ability to stand on my own 2 feet, no longer dependent upon anybody to feed me, clothe me, shelter me, etc. And when that happened, interestingly enough, the dust settled, and I came back to the same questions that I had when I was an adolescent, and that was, who are we? Why are we here? Where are we going? I knew that I felt that Christianity was fine for some people, but it didn't answer a lot of the big questions that I had. Furthermore, I had some problems with the paternalism, with the fire and brimstone, with the uh, ultimate good, ultimate evil of heaven and hell. Um, and so I began to reflect on, some other philosophies. In college, by the way, I was lucky enough to study Buddhism and Hinduism and take anthropology and learn why people do what they do. So I gravitated back to Santeria Lukumi, and I began again reading, studying, going to different botanicas and asking a lot of very similar questions. And I began to get very similar, frustrating answers. You're not ready to learn that. You're impertinent for asking that. You have to be initiated before we can talk about it. And I also was smart enough to know that Santeria Lukumi had been infused with Catholicism, had been infused with a lot of the paternalism and the heaven and hell, and that was not what the original Africans had envisioned. At least so I thought. So I began a very detailed search of how did Santeria and Lukumi become what it is today. And I kept going back to this word, the Yoruba people and Ifa. I had no idea what Ifa was. Um, so through the internet, I picked up a book or two of Ifa, and it was very, very different than what I had experienced in Santeria Lukumi. And you notice, by the way, I'm not saying better or worse. If Santeria Lukumi works for some people, then that's great. Uh, but I kept going back to this philosophy that was clearly different than what I had been taught or what I had been shown. And then I was out on the internet and I came across the IFA Foundation, ifafoundation.org, and a gentleman named Philip Nymark. And I watched his videos, and he made a lot of sense. And I read one of his books, and it made a lot of sense. And being financially independent, having some measure of success, I certainly had some time on my hands, so I reached out to Phil, and we began to have some conversations. And the first thing is he taught me that this is a benevolent universe where everything is designed to work. The second thing was there is no devil, there is no absolute evil force out to get you. Those two alone were game changers for me, were mind blowers for me. I should back up actually. The first thing he ever taught me, being the Obatala that he is, that was life changing in the way that I looked at spiritual philosophy, and write this one down and stick it in your notebooks, is if it's not logical, it's not true. The idea to me that there was this wonderful father-like figure sitting on a cloud in heaven, battling it out with this dark, demonic presence in a fiery pit over your soul was always absurd to me. And Phil's answer was, if your logical mind tells you that it's absurd, then it probably is. And what Ifa teaches is that there is no ultimate evil vying for your soul. That God is, uh, and that you know certain aspects of our life are preordained or predestined. Our destiny is selected before we come, but you make the choices as to how you're going to navigate that destiny or that time here. And when a shoe holds out two choices for you, you ultimately are the one who picks them and reaps the either rewards or the consequences. And that's not the devil, that's fate, that's opportunity. So Phil's words really resonated and they really made sense to me. Long story short, we had a couple discussions about initiation with him and his wife Vasa, um, about what their initiation process looked like, and some issues that I had always had with initiation from what I had observed. And Phil again said, that may have been what you have seen, but that's not A, how it has to be, or B, how you have to have it done. And I decided to initiate, and that was around Christmas time of 2009, so almost 10 years ago. Ever since then, I have been learning, studying, and walking the path of Ifa. I have received, my crowning Orisha, my Ifa, several other Orishas, several other ceremonies. But more importantly, I've been able to perform all the ceremonies that I had always witnessed and perform them in a manner that was in alignment with my worldview and in alignment with what I believe Ifa teaches. Everything from sheddings and cleansings to initiations, the whole gamut. And that's ultimately the best way to learn this philosophy. There are a lot of, I get asked a lot, what books should I read? And I can give you several references of decent books by very well respected and intelligent authors, such as Phil. But ultimately, Ifa must be experiential. The way that you're ultimately going to learn it is through a mentor, a spiritual mentor, hopefully one who demonstrates good character and a good understanding of the philosophy that resonates with you, that will take you under their wing and teach you firsthand how to divine, how to perform ceremonies, how to perform cleansings, how to initiate someone into the path of Ifa, how to create and crown orishas, etc., etc., etc. So for me, I'm 43 now. It's been about a 30-year journey in metaphysical understanding. Um, I'm fortunate that I have a background in Christianity so that I can speak intelligently about it and about what I think is very positive and what I think is very negative. But for me, living, working, breathing, studying, practicing Ifa every day um, has not only changed my life, but has made me finally understand myself and my place here in the universe at this time on this leg of my journey with the ancestors that I have, and it has gelled everything together. So, to the viewer who asked the question, could I please give a little bit more background on my spiritual journey? I hope that helps. I hope this resonates for some of you who may come from the same type of background that I do. And, feel free to reach out, ask any further questions. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.